They are the two most powerful legislators in the Roundhouse. Newly elected Speaker of the House Ken Martinez of Grants and Belen Senate Majority Leader Michael Sanchez. How they control the flow of legislation over the next 2 months will determine when, where, and whether the governor's proposals are heard. Their relationship with the governor and each other determines what gets done and what goes by the wayside. Here's NMIF producer Matt Grubbs.
Gentlemen, thanks both for taking some time to join us. A lot of the folks who are watching this session are watching it wondering what kind of a fight this is going to be. And I don't know if that's a fair term to use, but how does it feel in each of your respective chambers, sort of the tone of the session?
I thought the tone in the House was pretty good, at least on our House side with regard to working with the minority leadership, Representative Bratton, just watching the members interact with each other. Kind of walking through our leadership elections, both in the caucus and then on the floor with regard to Speaker. Straight line party vote, but there was no acrimony whatsoever on it. So as far as the House members getting along, it looks pretty good.
Getting along with each other, what about the fourth floor?
You know, so the Republican caucus will be carrying some of the fourth floor legislation, and of course some of that legislation may come from Democrats. The tone that I want to set is that you don't start from square one. You start from where you left off. Even on the most contentious issues, if you get at the last effort at a compromise solution, then you have a path towards solving it and kind of ending the gridlock on it.
You know, everything feels really positive. You know, I've said before, we're going into this session optimistic, hoping that we can work with the fourth floor to come up with some really good, sound policy for the people of the state of New Mexico, not just Republicans or Democrats, but all the people of the state. So our floor session began pretty calmly, and we get along well with the other side of the aisle. If we had more communication with the fourth floor, you know, it might help a little bit, but it is what it is. But I look forward to a very positive session.
To that end, when was the last time that either one of you sat down with the governor to talk about some of this, or were invited to sit down with the governor?
I met with her yesterday.
Yesterday?
Yeah.
Productive?
It was informal and kind of just talking. We did look at what she had presented briefly, not nuts and bolts, not crossing T's, dotting I's.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure she knew that I was willing to look at anything. Went to some of the big issues of last go around, stuff we saw in the mail boxes and on the radio in the election cycle, driver's licenses for the undocumented. Where do we get on the retention bill versus early intervention? How do you balance that? And I told her we were on the House side very close to solutions on both of those. In fact, in my opinion, calm minds that were willing to think about things would be able to solve both of those in about 30 minutes if you started where you left out. The third grade reading retention early intervention bill was being debated in House Judiciary Committee while the entire House is waiting for that report to come down. They knocked some language back and forth, didn't get to the last thing. The remaining issue is what extent are parents involved in that decision-making process, trying to create a compromise that was meaningful to both sides. They ran out of time, came back down without having done that compromise. I offered to say, let's go into the majority office on the first floor right outside the chambers, continue to work on that. I think there was a decision made that we got the votes, let's just run it. So unfortunately, sometimes a stitch in nine saves nine. If we would have taken 15, 20 minutes to talk, we may have saved an hour and a half of a debate. On the driver's license issue, and Senator Sanchez knows this, we had a very open debate, went through every single committee with Representative Nunez on that bill, gave everybody an opportunity to educate themselves on the intricacies of that. And it's pretty simple. On one hand, there's no reason to vilify a person that wants to have public safety as an issue. So you're worrying about the safety of citizens in New Mexico. It's a governmental thing, and I understand the governor comes from that point of view. But there shouldn't vilify the other side that says, but there's also a human component to this. There's children that came over, when they're 6 months old, that are here, that are American in every spirit, in every letter of the word, except for that little piece of paper. And shouldn't they be able to drive? Shouldn't they be licensed, tested, insured, and drive? And so, can we find compromise in that? I think we can.
No, I haven't been as fortunate as the Speaker Martinez. I haven't talked to the governor since last year sometime. So I don't know what her feeling is toward any of the issues other than what I read in the paper or see on TV. But I'm always open to discussion, obviously.
And I guess if you're disagreeing with issues or fighting over issues, it certainly has to be a fight over something. These issues like driver's license, social promotion, those are the two of the big ones from the fourth floor. I know critics, Senator, you called it, I believe, a wedge issue. Do these feel like the kind of things that the fight is going to be over?
Well, the driver's license, I think there was an opinion by someone out there in a political circle says, we can win on this. We can take Democrats out. And you had Democrats say, there is a human component to it. I wanted to look at that, and they ran for office without fear or anger about that issue, and the voters understood that. So if it was a wedge issue, that wedge is pretty dull right now. And I think people are just tired of this kind of anti-immigrant sentiment that played itself out, especially in the GOP primary at the presidential level. So I think there's part of that. People are tired of this kind of partisan or wedge issue stuff. What I see as the biggest thing we do up here is the budget. And when you look at the numbers on the budget, they're very close. And in fact, it's been my experience that the legislative budget usually is a little more fiscally conservative than the executive proposal. And I appreciate that. We've always had a balanced budget. The little impending scenario I see in the budget is, we have a small increase for the state employees that's not in the executive budget. Does that become a big fight? I don't know. But I think that's the only thing I see there. So that's a new one. The third grade reading retention bill, I've had nice chats with the bill sponsor, Mary Helen Garcia. She's worked very hard on it through the interim. Took it to LESC now before we started Legislative Education Study Committee. I have to remember not to do all these alphabet soup we do up here for the folks that are viewing it, which is the interim committee on education. She says, look, let me just put it here. Let's not debate it or argue about it. Let's just circulate it so we have early read on it and start looking at it very well together. That bodes very well for that bill.
Well, I don't know that you should label it as fighting. I mean, it's debate, it's compromise, it's working to come up with sound policy for the state. Obviously, the budget is a big issue. Personally, I think that the LFC recommendation should have been higher for state employees and teachers in particularly. I'm not real thrilled about the 1%, but the governor doesn't have it in her budget. I think that's an issue that we're going to have to discuss and debate. The economy, the jobs, working on capital outlay is very important. And it isn't something you fight over. It's something that our communities have a need for. There's capital outlay projects that cities and municipalities, villages, counties need, our schools, capital outlay projects. So those are things that again, I don't think there's a fight over, it's just a debate. And one of the things that always has to happen when we're talking about education, what the House feels about education in terms of reform and in terms of a bill that's circulated through the Legislative Education Study Committee, there may be members in the Senate who weren't on that committee who have a different opinion of how and the different items within the bill. And so, again, it's the debate, discussion, compromise to come up with something that's good for all of the state. And that's, like I said at the beginning, I don't look at this session as being a fight. I look at this session as being an opportunity to move forward, to work together. And as I said yesterday, it's one thing to say things, it's another thing to show it through your actions. And that's what I'm looking for in this administration. let's see what you have. Talk is talk, but let's get down to talking to one another and figuring out where we can compromise, working together again. Elections are over. Your political operatives shouldn't be deciding policy. We should be deciding policy together, the governor and the legislators, to make sure our state and our children are protected and moving forward.
When you talk to Republicans, sometimes on the fourth floor and sometimes just your colleagues, the frustration that they seem to have is that New Mexico so often ranks near the bottom in many categories, whether it's a percentage of people uninsured, outright poverty, being something like 48th or 49th in education. They say that, look, all that has happened under Democratic control of both houses and certainly the House of Representatives. It's all happened while the Democrats have been in power in the state legislature, and yet they refuse to take ownership over some of these issues and realize that, hey, maybe it's time to take a different look at this and see if there's a different way.
Well, I'll try to answer that first. It's a common complaint by a minority party. The numbers that they quote most of the time in education, 49th, the numbers that we show, and I think Senator Morales tried to clarify it last year, I think we're 30th, not 49th. But they skew numbers, and that's their prerogative to be able to use it in elections against Democrats, and they've done it continuously. It's nothing new. It's what they've done continuously. Well, if they truly want to work together to come up with an idea, instead of saying this is what we're going to do, this is what you have to do, it's how can we work together to make sure and get things done that are better. I'll just point to last year and the driver's license issue as an example. This is what you have to do. That isn't compromise, in my opinion. That isn't working together to come up with something that's good, sound, and solid. So working together is what our goal is, at least in the Senate. And I'm not going to speak for the House, but I think that's clear from what Speaker Martinez has already said. So, old arguments, old ideas aren't always that bad. I think we're learning from the A through F grading system that wasn't exactly the best idea. I mean, we're having problems throughout the state on that issue. Teachers' evaluations, we're finding out that there's real issues there. So just pushing something through and saying, well, those Democrats are just stubborn and it's the old way of doing things. Now, there's a rhyme or a reason for it, because we're a deliberative body. We need to debate the pros and the cons and come up with something that is good, instead of doing something that has unintended consequences. So we've always got to be careful of that.
What I've noticed up here and what I try to steer us away from is, it seems to me everybody takes credit for everything that's good and no one's willing to stand up and take the blame. To say that Democrats or Republicans that are at fault for some of the things that we're suffering in our state is not seeking a solution. It's trying to lay blame instead of looking at how to fix it. To say the House or the Senate is at fault doesn't seek a solution. To say the executive branch is at fault, not the legislative branch, doesn't seek a solution. So I try to avoid that. The Democrats have been in control because the state of New Mexico voters had said they should be. They believe we're doing the right thing for the most part, for the most time. And you see that at the polls. The Republicans have been very included in that, and we've had divided governments a lot. New Mexico is a pretty purple state for a lot of reasons. We had a senior senator forever. We had a Republican and a Democrat. We've been in the Republicans' administration of Governor Johnson, then Democrat administration of Governor Richardson, and we're 2 years into the Martinez administration. So the burden of dealing with these issues falls squarely upon all of us. But I also want to say one other thing. When you look at education, you look at the economy, it's just not the government's total and only role. These are bigger issues. Education is a societal issue. And some of the things that we are dealing with in education is related matters, such as the structure of the family, the poverty rate, the very rural nature of New Mexico, where it's harder to get services out to the rural communities that you would have in a higher density cluster that you have in other cities. So we can say government can do a lot to do it, and we should always look at that, but we've got to understand some of these problems are bigger than just us.
Speaker Martinez, a lot of the Republicans, folks like Don Bratton and Nate Gentry, they've been concerned in the past over Speaker Lujan's interpretation of the rules, and they felt sometimes like they got run over. What they've been hoping for in your taking over this position is that maybe they'll be treated, in their eyes, a little bit more fairly.
Yeah, you know, Speaker Lujan, for a large part of his speakership, I was parliamentarian. And for another part of it, I was the floor leader. So everything he did in the rules was upon my motion. And I got to tell you, he was right as far as I can remember. I know a couple of times they said, boy, you guys actually absolutely ran over us on the rules. And then I took them aside, I said, did you read this section? They go, oh. So there was some of that, but the rule is, number one, that the majority rules. That's how it works. You vote, and the majority rules, just like the electorate. The majority elects somebody, and to have an election contest, say, you know, I lost by 25 votes, but overturn the ruling of the majority and put me in office, it doesn't work. That's not the American way. So that's that rule. Having said that, instead of trying to look back, and I think Speaker Lujan was fair, I want to look forward. And what I have told Representative Bratton, he's the leader and I should visit with him, he says, you and I are going to meet on a weekly basis, no agenda, just sit down and talk. If you feel that something's been unfair, let me know. And if you think we're moving towards an unfairness, let me know. There will be times that we will have very partisan debate and there will be rulings. And we'll move forward on that. But for the most part, instead of talking about individual rulings, you should talk about a process that becomes a process of fairness. I've been very happy that we've had a very good opening 2 days with regard to things that your viewers probably haven't thought about, but parking spaces, offices. Next thing, you know, you just build on your little successes. We get all the parking spaces taken care of, get all the offices taken care of on both sides in a fair manner. You take care of all the committee assignments and chairmanships, and then you do that, and now, you know, you start doing the bill referrals. So far, it's worked very well. There'll be some hiccups, but I think it'll be more of a process than an individual rulemaking decision.
If both of you think back to, I think it was 2004 when Lieutenant Governor Denish and Governor Richardson, sometime around then, were trying to push through the pre-K pilot program. There seems to have been sort of a shift among people from both parties since then that if you're going to spend more money on education, spending it on early education might be a worthy place to do that. Is it feeling like that to both of you, and are things like this constitutional amendment asking for a bigger payout of permanent funds, do those things feel like they have more traction?
Well, I'm introducing the constitutional amendment again, and whether they have traction is I think they have more traction. It has more traction than it did last year, and I believe Voices is correct. I think we need to start at an earlier age. I think all of the studies have shown that if you start at that early age, that child is less likely to be deficient in reading, math, or science if you make them healthy and you start educating them earlier. The child yesterday in that was in the State of the State, there's a prime example of using your money wisely at a younger age and the progress they make. Again, Speaker Martinez hit on it and right to the point. You know, we have a very big state, and we have pockets of poverty. We have people living in different areas that aren't accessible at times. The key is reaching all of those, not just in our urban areas, but those rural areas. The Navajo Nation, you know, the Pueblos. You know, that's the difference in the diversity of our state. And so by this constitutional amendment going through, and I'm hoping we'll be able to get out of Senate Finance this year for a vote on the floor, I think that will show our commitment to the people of the state of New Mexico that we are truly interested in education reform and making sure our children are ready to learn the minute they get even into the first grade.
We should make public policy not based upon politics, but based upon best practices. We had an expert come in a few years ago, about 6 years ago, talking about what you can do, starting at infancy, and knowing that the sooner you get involved, the better off you are, and it's money well spent. You spend money early on, infancy, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, you're saving money later on, including in the Department of Corrections.
Sure.
So we know that, and I think the governor recognizes that because she seems to be focusing on some of these early ed issues. That doesn't mean that secondary schools, the high schools aren't important, and college isn't important. That's critically important. But boy, you need to be there at the very beginning, or else you're playing catch up the rest of the way. Retention isn't the only answer, though. The early intervention is the answer, and it's science, and it's professionals, and a professional has to go in there and assess, and the assessment would be what are the educational deficits. There's a scientific assessment model to do that, and then you come up with an assessment plan to act upon it. A one-size-fits-all. I mean, you don't go to a doctor and say to the doctor that every kid that comes in with asthma is going to get the following medicine. And if they don't get better, you just keep them there. You let the doctor assess the situation as it goes, and the situation will change. So it is a difficult, professional, labor-intensive process, and it is expensive. And honestly, you have to put your money where your mouth is. It costs money to intervene early, but the dollars that you spend early are dollars that you save later.
Do you mind if I use that before the Senate Finance Committee, that asthma? And Doctor? I'll try my best.
We've been stealing each other's lines for 20 years now, so that's okay.
But I can never tell the joke the way he tells the joke, so.
Well, gentlemen, thanks so much for your time. We know there's a lot to do in these first few days of the session, and we thank you for coming in.
Sure.
Appreciate it, and thank you for having us.